when you finish.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee. I can confirm that the meeting is being live streamed. There is no planned fire drill today, so if the fire alarm does sound, members of staff will guide you safely out the building. Can I please remind members to speak clearly into the microphone in order that this can be picked up on the live stream? Also, could I request that all mobile phones are switched off or on silent? And finally, please, when the meeting has finished, can I ask members of the committee to place their committee papers in the lockable bins that can be found near the door? Also, can you dispose of any general rubbish in the waste bins provided? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. Can you just bear with us while we go through our normal agenda before we start the actual hearing? Thank you. Item 1 is election of chairman. Thank you. Item 2, disclosure of interest. Any disclosures of interest? No, thank you. Any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 4 is the exclusion of public and press. The content of this report is not exempt.
Chair, if I can just jump in, I don't think there's going to be any need for the confidential session at this hearing.
So we're all right.
So you're okay. I will double check when I do my part in a moment just to see if anybody's got any issues, but I think you're going to be fine.
If there is, we can always go into private session later. Thank you. Well, I'll hand over to you then, Mr. Twiddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll go through the report, but I think probably best for you just today, because you've got two people here that perhaps are new to this kind of proceedings. So the gentlemen that are with Mr. Keng, they're representing the premises licence holder. So did you both want to just introduce yourselves today so the committee are aware of who you are, or did Michael want to introduce you, whichever?
I'll do it, might be easier. Robert Blyde is the DPS of Little Nans, and John Harris is the director of the company of the premises licence holder. Shane Harris, sorry. What did I get that wrong? Shane Harris. And Happy New Year to you all as well.
Happy New Year. Councillor Jones, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an application for review of a premises licence in respect of the Little Nans Cafe, and it's at Chapel St Leonard's, and the application for review has been called by the environmental health team, and you've got a copy of that application for review in the report pack which you have before you. So on the subject of the report pack and all the other documentary evidence, I think, Chair, it's probably a good idea before we go any further that I just check that everybody's got the paperwork that they need for this hearing. So the first thing that I'm going to say is the actual report pack and the agenda that came from myself and committee admin, and that would have been one of the first things that everybody got. So everybody happy they've got a copy of that? Yep, okay. Also, yesterday, Mr. Keng, on behalf of the premises licence holder, emailed me a reference for Little Nans, and that and in particular in relation to Mr. Shane Harris, the director of the company, and that's from the Cherry Park and Little Oaks Bungalows company. Hopefully everybody's got a copy of that one. Okay. Also, I'll say to Mr. Keng, the emails that I received in support of Little Nans, which people have got redacted copies of, we have given the members a copy where there is no redaction. So, okay, the members have got that one. There is also Mr. Keng's evidence pack on behalf of the premises licence holder. That's called the Premises Licence Holders Documentary Evidence Bundle, and that's got photographs that Mr. Keng has taken from the air with his drone. Then those photographs are annotated, and then you've got a copy of the emails in support of the premises which have been redacted in certain areas, and then Mr. Keng's referring to parts of the section 182 statutory guidance to licensing authorities. So hopefully everybody's got that one. There is also the evidence pack submitted by the Environmental Health Department, which is on pink paper. And I think the easiest way for me to describe that is that it's on pink paper for those that have got it on pink, and then the last page looks like an ECG, I'm going to say. And then there's this second evidence pack from the environmental health team, and that gives you an email trail between Mr. Keng and Mr. John Dixon from the environmental health team, showing the discussions that took place between the two of them prior to today's review hearing. Now, there will be finally, hopefully, there are some photographs which hopefully most people have got access to. You might have to share some of the photographs. I didn't have enough for every person, and they show the outside area at Little Nans. So hopefully everybody's got those in front of them. Neil, have you got? No. Okay. I'm going to pass those down. Thank you. Unless anybody tells me different, that's all the evidence I'm expecting everybody to have in front of them today. Is that okay?
Yeah,
right.
fine.
So the other thing I wanted to say before we get into the meat and bones of the hearing, let's say, is that I don't think there's going to be anything confidential discussed today. If there is anything that you perhaps feel is confidential and shouldn't be in the public domain, you need to make that known to the chair of the committee, Councillor Sandra Campbell-Wardman, and then there'll be a discussion with the legal advisor about whether the committee goes into private session or not. What you need to realise today, because this is a public meeting, the public could have access. Because it's a public meeting, we do stream the meetings live on YouTube. If there are any confidential aspects of the meeting, then we would switch off the YouTube stream. And also any members of the public that were in this room would be asked to leave. But as far as I know, looking around the room, I'm not aware of any need for us to go into confidential session unless something happens that I'm not aware of. So, as we've said, this is an application for review of a premises licence in respect of Little Nans. I'm not going to go through my report in detail because, of course, everybody's had an opportunity to read and digest that prior to the hearing. The actual review application relates to the protection of public nuisance licensing objective. There are 4 licensing objectives, but as far as I'm aware, we're not looking at the other 3 licensing objectives here. Today is primarily or is focused on the protection of prevention of public nuisance. Now, on page 2 of my report pack, it just set out the decisions that the committee can make today. But in that range of decisions that they can make, I think a lot of the things that are there, the environmental health team are not asking the committee to consider. As far as I understand the situation, what the environmental health team are asking is for the live music exemption to be taken away from the premises and conditions to be attached to the licence to control the level of live music or regulated entertainment that's played in the outside area of the premises. So I'll let the environmental health team go through that. So the range of decisions that are detailed in that report, I think a lot of those are redundant and not relevant today because they're not being asked to be considered by the environmental health team. Chair, I probably think there's not a great deal for me to say apart from that. I think it's probably best if you hand across to the environmental health team for them to present their case. And then, of course, there'll be an opportunity for parties to ask questions. And then, of course, for Mr. Keng on behalf of the licence holder to present their case. I think, unless anybody's got any specific questions for me, it's probably best if I hand back to yourself.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to present your case, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm John Dixon. The reason for the review is the prevention of public nuisance because of noise from the premises. We've had quite a large amount of complaints came in between May and early September for the premises. There's one from a resident of a property which is opposite, which is also a pub, but there is a residential flat above the pub. From an occupier of a caravan on Greenacres Park, which is virtually opposite the site as well, and that's sort of the distance to Greenacres Park from where the music's provided is about between 20 and 120 metres. An occupier of a caravan on Sherwood Park, which is to the north, and that caravan site starts from immediately behind where the music is provided and goes to about 100 metres away. And then we've had a number of complaints, 7 from individuals on the Beaches Caravan Park, which is located to the south, and that's between about 230 and 500 metres away. And then 3 from individuals on the Kingsfield Chalet Estate, which is a semi-holiday, semi-residential chalet estate that's between 230 and 470 metres away, again to the south. Sort of details of when those complaints were received are all within the main submission, so I don't want to have to go through all of that because I know you'll have read it already. We have established, in our opinion, that the outdoor music and amplified voices provided in the immediate vicinity of the licensed area of Little Nans has caused particularly the nearest residential property to be exposed to levels and nature of noise that we think is completely unacceptable given how often the music is provided. And we have previously advised the premises licence holder that it is not appropriate to provide the type of music and entertainment outside at such a level and such a frequency on the basis that it will cause significant noise to propagate to properties, particularly the one opposite, but also to an extent to caravans and holiday accommodation in the vicinity. Excuse me. However, there has been frequent outdoor entertainment through the spring, summer and autumn of this, and early autumn of this year, with entertainment. It has been somewhat weather permitting because we didn't have the greatest summer, and I know there were times when you maybe didn't able to do what you wanted to do, but Saturdays and Sundays has been fairly common, weather permitting. Occasionally on Wednesdays, and then in school holidays there's also been entertainment on other days of the week as well when there's more for the peak tourist seasons of the school holidays. There is a planning issue with the site as well, in that planning enforcement have deemed that planning permission is required to change the use from what was a cafe to a predominantly drinking establishment, and also a premises where entertainment is provided outside. Again, there's further information about that within the main submission, and I did speak to the planning enforcement officer yesterday, who informed me that at the moment there's been no application for planning permission, but because music isn't actually being provided at the moment, there's not any ongoing breach at the moment, so they're not actually taking any planning action because of the activity at the moment, because it's not an ongoing situation. Given that the noise arises as a direct result of entertainment provided at the licensed premises, although it is off the licensed area, and I don't the licensed area actually covers the inter side of the premises, so it's actually associated with the land associated with the licensed premises rather than being within the licensed premises area. and the license doesn't provide any specific, it doesn't include specific music provisions within the license. So we're aware that the entertainment is provided within the live music, under the live music exemption, which allows entertainment to be provided without it needing to be licensed. We're not concerned about any noise from inside of the building. Our only concerns are noise from what's happened outside. And what we're sort of requesting is that the licensing committee removes the exemption that allows music. It's live music, which in most occasions, in terms of what I've heard, has been live performers singing to backing tracks. You can tell me if that's wrong, but it sounds like that's mostly what yeah. And there's been karaoke. There's also been some recorded music, which is at a level that on occasions is more than you really want with background music, in terms of how much noise propagates into the internal areas of the premises opposite. And there's also noise from PA announcements, which includes bingo and just announcement of offers and various things that are happening at the place, which is also fairly loud given how close it is to the premises opposite. We are concerned that it's not easy to, we don't think it's easy to necessarily resolve the situation through the provision of conditions if the frequency of occurrence of the outdoor activity is going to carry on being a routine thing that's happening on a regular basis. So that's one of the reasons we don't think a noise limiter is necessarily a great solution, and because the proximity of the residential property and some of the caravans mean that it's very difficult to provide the activity at a level that would be appropriate to the audience and to the license holder, and then also not create the noise, because the noise will propagate because of how close it is to the nearest property. And that's the reason that we've asked that outdoor music be restricted to 3 days in a year. And the reason why we've asked for the 3-day restriction is because the levels of noise that have been imposed this year have been at a level that is at and above what we apply when we're dealing with a festival or a music event that's maybe happening on 1 to 3 days a year. So the levels of noise that are being imposed routinely are at the level that you would try and restrict a festival or a general music event to. And for that, we go from the Noise Council Code of Practice on Environmental Noise Control at Concerts, which introduces a noise level of 65 dBA at the outside of any sensitive property, and 70 decibels in the 2-octave bands where bass sounds are. So that's the bass beats, the lower frequency sound of music. But the levels that have been imposed on the property opposite inside mean that those levels have been exceeded quite routinely. So the difficulty that we're envisioning is, how do you get from that position where they're routinely being exposed to noise levels that are sort of above really what you'd want when there was a really infrequent event, and how do you get to the point where frequent music can be provided and it not cause a problem? Because the issue with music is the more often you do it, the more you have to be in control of the levels of noise, because it's okay to a certain extent to expose people to noise infrequently, but the more often it happens, then the more that noise needs to be under control to make sure that the way that the noise is imposed isn't a routine thing. So the more often it happens, the lower the level needs to be. We consider that were there more than 3 event days to happen in a year, there would be a need to reduce, they'd need to reduce the permitted level of noise that could be imposed on people in the vicinity. Noise Council guidance is a stepped process in that it works for 0 to 3 days for the very infrequent events, 0 to 12 days for the fairly infrequent but not frequent events, and then there's also lower levels if it's happening more frequently than 12 days a year. If music was to be restricted to 12 days a year, it would be necessary to restrict the music level to 15 decibels above the background. So the background sound level is the underlying sound level in the area, which is technically it's the sound that's exceeded for 90% of the time. And the reason why background is important is because the higher the background, the less another noise will be noticeable. But when there's a lower background sound, then any noise stands out more than it would if it was in a noisy area. So for up to 12 days a year, it would be necessary to restrict it to 15 decibels above background. However, that may not be that easy to do, given how close the properties are, and then also for the entertainment to be acceptable to the license holders and also to their customers, because entertainment needs to be adequate or it doesn't feel like entertainment. However, if there were more than 12 days per year, sort of 12 to 30, then it is no longer acceptable to go for the 15 decibels above background. The more often you get, then the lower the level has to get to for it not to be a problem. And the issue that we have is that whilst it may be possible to get to 15 decibels above background, and it might be that might be achievable and the noise be okay to the customers, any more than that, we don't see how technically that can be achieved, so that the noise the music, the entertainment would be okay for the people that are hearing it, but the noise wouldn't be a problem to other people. So that's the difficulty we have, is the balance between how often it happens and how loud it is. So that has been our main reason for this review, really, is because the noise is at a level which is a problem. We could live with it given the nature of the area if it was happening 1 to 3 days a year, and I'd be able to say to people, yeah, that's loud, that's maybe intrusive, but it's not happening that often. So it's an area where there's tourist activity, so you're going to have to put up with it for a limited amount of time. The more often it happens, we no longer have that argument, because it's impacting on amenity more frequently. In terms of the additional information that was provided in the main presentation, I don't want to go into that in too much detail, other than we initially contacted the license holder and the then DPS. I'm aware that the DPS has changed since that point, back in May this year. And then I had subsequent conversation with Mr. Harris following that initial letter. And at that point, I explained that the potential concerns that we've got in terms of, it's been alleged that music's been provided fairly frequently. And I explained our concerns about frequency of occurrence and level of noise that's likely to be imposed. And at that point, I explained that the more often music is provided, the lower the levels need to be. We did carry out a monitoring exercise in mid-June this year. We went to Chapel St Leonard's, and we also went to some premises that we needed to look at in Ingermells as well. And at that point, Mr. Dodds and one of my colleagues did some initial monitoring in the vicinity of Little Nans. And at that point, the levels of sound imposed on, I think it was a chalet in the vicinity, but it was on the Cherry Park site on that occasion, was up at the premises, at the concert 1 to 3 days a year levels. So at that point, it was a significant noise that was okay very occasionally, but not okay routinely. And following that monitoring, we sent a further letter to the premises license holders, explaining that at that point we were still investigating, but we thought there's maybe likely to be an issue going forward. And then again, we explained that because of the close proximity of receptors, that we didn't consider that it's appropriate to routinely provide music outside, because of the amount of noise that will impose on other people. And we also gave advice about background music as well, and keeping that at a reasonable level. but at that point, we advised that we do not believe that the outdoor area of Cherry Park is suitable as a routine venue for outdoor entertainment level music. So we made that clear at that point. Following that letter, I commenced a period of monitoring where I deployed noise equipment within the nearest property on about 4 occasions. I had to do it on a number of occasions for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this was in through July, which I don't know how well you remember the summer, but it was a particularly wet and horrible summer, and I was aware that through that period of time there were periods when there was music, but there were also periods when the weather was such that outdoor activities of this type are not like to happen in the same way that they would when the weather's nice, because people don't want to sit outside when it's raining. However, despite that, over about a four-week period, we did get evidence of, again, concert levels of noise that are happening on a routine basis. So the sort of levels of noise that you'd expect maybe a very infrequent music event to provide were routinely being imposed on the nearest property. Now, the levels that we took, all the readings were taken inside, but you get a fairly predictable level of noise reduction from an outside to inside through an openable window. And on the basis of that, again, we're confident that the levels of noise that were imposed on that property were not acceptable in any way in a routine situation. The intention was to play back some recordings of the noise tier. However, it seems that overnight my computer's had a Windows update, which has caused a clash between the Windows software and our noise software, which means that I can't play back the recordings. I'm sorry about that. We did test it. Well, it's tested Wednesday, and I was using it yesterday, but it seems like this update has happened overnight, so I apologise for that. But what I also did, because I was aware that that this equipment was remote equipment, so I install it in a particular way so that I know the microphone's in a position that's representative of the person's property, but I'm not there with it. So I can't see exactly when the recordings have been made. So because of this, I decided that the best thing for me to do was to go and do some first-hand monitoring. And I did that on the 9th of September when I sat in the lounge of the property opposite. And I carried out my own monitoring where I effectively listened to the noise, but I also monitored it with the noise equipment. And on that day, on the 9th of September, again, the music noise was extreme. It was up in the mid to high 50 decibels within the property, which means that the outdoor level would have been about 10 to 15 decibels higher, which means that, again, it would have been exceeding the concert guidelines that are applicable on a 1 to 3 days per year. And on the basis of what I heard on that day and what it sounded like, what the levels were, I'm then confident that the recordings that were made by the complainants on the previous times when our remote noise equipment was deployed were representative of the true situation. So that basically increased my confidence that what the people had recorded was a true indication of what they were experiencing. So for that was just that extra bit of confidence in myself that yeah, that noise is as bad as I think it is, and the noise that was imposed is excessive and not appropriate in a routine situation. So that was the confirmatory monitoring that I carried out myself, just so I could be certain that the noise was an issue and that there wasn't something strange happening with the equipment when I wasn't there looking at it. We did have equipment as well in caravans more distant. These were in the range of about these were sort of in the distance of about 200 to 250 meters away. On one occasion there was a little bit of noise, but it wasn't problematic. On another occasion, on a second weekend, there was more noise. It wasn't awful, wasn't anything like as loud as it was directly opposite, but it was still at a level that was readily audible. It would have been worse for people if they were sitting outside on the veranda of the caravan at that sort of distance away. And my view of that is that it was likely to be from Little Nans. I can't be as certain as I can be with the noise from directly opposite, because it couldn't be from anywhere else in the directly opposite place. But it's likely that it was from that property, and it's also likely that that a good number of people aren't going to consider that noise to be a reasonable thing to be happening on a routine basis. No, it's nothing like as bad because it's a lot further away, but it was readily audible and it would be annoying to people. So that's really the as much as I can tell you in respect of the noise. There's plenty of graphs in the pack which demonstrate the sound levels, so you can see how with those you can see how the noise varies with time. But the way the sort of process worked in terms of what people were hearing, there would tend to be maybe three batches of live music, singers singing to backing tracks, and between that there'll be some recorded music, maybe occasionally some karaoke, and also some bingo. This would, and depending on the weather, this could happen from sort of after midday through to the early evening, 7, 8 o'clock. It was never at night, never late night noise. It's not, no sleep disturbance issues, but it's affecting the amenity of people's properties. And the property, as I said, across the road is a pub, so they have their own activities, but there is a residential property above that pub, and the effective amenity time of that resident is more afternoons because they're working themselves in the evenings in their own licensed premises. So it is their residential amenity time, and it's not the same as it being a completely separate residential property. But it's not it's got no connection with a licensed premises, but it still is a residential property, and they've still got a right to a decent amount of amenity within their property. So overall, on the basis of what we know about when we did our record, when we got monitoring evidence, and also what we know about how the premises operated and what we've been told in terms of noise diaries, we're fairly confident that the sort of significant music was provided outside on a conservative estimate of at least between 40 and 50 times through the spring, summer, and early autumn. We haven't got evidence of all of those, but knowing that it happened most Saturdays and Sundays, weather permitting, occasional Wednesdays, and also some days during the school holidays, we're confident that it happened that often. Wasn't always the same. Sometimes it would have been louder than others, but it would have always a lot. Through those days, it would have been significant. There were some days when the activity didn't carry on very long. It may have just been an hour and a half, and it was rained off effectively, because that was the nature of some of the summer weather that we had this year. It meant that some activities that people would like to have carried out for longer it wasn't always possible just because of the weather. So it is clear that the occupiers of the property above have had their amenity, property opposite have had their amenity impacted, but there will also have been impact on the amenity of caravans and holiday accommodation in the area. Some people don't mind because some people are entirely there for the entertainment, but there are plenty of people that do like to be able to have they like to go to the places, but they like a fairly quiet base where they can go and relax at other times. So in terms of the overall situation in respect to the nearest property, which is one where the worst noise has been imposed, there has been unreasonable interference with the use and enjoyment of that property routinely through this year, and that noise would have been at a level that would interfere with normal living activities, whether this is relaxing, watching television, talking to friends and family, and it's been a routine interference rather than an occasional one. And our position is that it's not appropriate for any noise sensitive property to be exposed to noise of this nature on such a routine and frequent basis. And where entertainment is provided routinely, we believe that it is incumbent on whoever is providing that entertainment to ensure that the resulting noise does not adversely impact on other people. And sometimes this means that not every venue is appropriate as a location for routine outdoor entertainment because of what else is in the area. And where our other concern is that we know that if you are providing entertainment, it does need to be entertainment, and we are worried about how practical that is to be provided routinely, whilst ensuring that the levels of noise imposed on others aren't excessive. And hence, we don't quite know how it would be possible to control that with a limiter if it was if music was provided routinely. And that again, that is why we've asked for the exemption to be removed and for it to be restricted to 3 days per year. Now, since I submitted the initial application, we have had contact with Mr. Keng. He emailed me and asked me 2 or 3 questions, which were all perfect, all good questions, which I tried to. I then tried to reply to and give some, reply to the questions, and also give you people information on the basis of which you may want to consider when you're deciding if it is appropriate to remove the live music exemption, whether it's appropriate to impose conditions, and also whether it's appropriate to impose a limit on the number of days that music is provided. And Mr. Keng asked a number of specific questions. He did ask whether changes to the number, size and location or an orientation of the speakers, so which way they're directed, and whether a noise limiter being installed could resolve the situation so that it could be provided on, music could be provided on more than 3 days per year. Now, the email that I provided to Mr. Keng is included within your pack, and that's the second of our bits of evidence that Mr. Twiddy referred to. And he also, Mr. Keng, at that point, he asked for information as much as I could provide about where the complaints were from and about whether our intention is solely to remove the live music exemption, and we are only concerned about the outdoor activity, which is stuff that I confirmed. At this point, I reiterated that given the close proximity of the nearest residential property and some holiday properties, we were concerned about whether a noise limiter would be that practical in terms of resolving the situation, so that the premises light was providing the entertainment that it wanted to, but there was also not a noise problem caused. And at this point, I explained that when we are applying limits to music noise as it's imposed on people, that we do use the Noise Council Code of Practice of Environmental Noise Control at concerts, and that's what I referred to earlier. But within my email to Mr. Keng, there is a table in there that breaks down the number of music days per year, and then it also indicates what appropriate noise levels are depending on how often the music is provided. And it's not a the way it works, it's not a cumulative thing. So if you have 1 to 3 event days, you don't get those at the higher level and then the next ones are at the lower level. What tends to happen is the more you provide, then the lower level has to apply to all of them, because what you're trying to achieve is that, yeah, people are exposed to noise. However, the more often that happens, the less bad that noise will be in terms of how loud it is as they experience it at their property. And I reiterated that through the season, the music had been at the higher level that would be appropriate to the very occasional events. In respect of Mr. Keng asking whether entertainment could be provided on more than 3 days per year, I advised that if music was to be provided more often than that, it would be necessary to ensure compliance with a lower noise limit. And I directed Mr. Keng to the Noise Council Code of Practice and that for up to 12 days a year, it would be necessary to limit to 15 decibels above background, but also to reduce the bass frequencies compared to what would be acceptable at very occasional events. So as well as the overall level needs to be a bit quiet, the underlying bass needs to be somewhat lower than it would be as well, than with the music being provided more frequently. I did advise that unfortunately this would result in the experience for the customers not being quite the same as it was this year, in that the music will not be quite as loud and maybe not sound quite as they would have expected, because it would be necessary to reduce the levels somewhat compared to what was happening this year if you were complying with the 15 decibels above background. So this would have implications for effectively for how the entertainment is perceived by the people that are listening to it. And I also expressed my concern about how easy it would be to use a limiter in a situation where it's used outside, because limiters are electronic devices, so they need to be protected from weather or they degrade. So it needs to either be something that can be protected from the weather, or something that could be brought out with the equipment that's used for the entertainment, which somewhat complicates things. And I advise that these issues, my concern about the use of a limiter, my concern about would it work, would it keep the levels quite low enough, and also by doing that, would it mean that the entertainment wasn't adequate? That's one of the reasons why I hadn't suggested that in my initial review application, because because I didn't want to bring a situation that would not resolve the problem, but would also result in the licensed premises providing entertainment that it wasn't happy with, because so that's one of the reasons why I didn't suggest 12 days and background plus 15 decibels initially. In terms of Mr. Keng's questions about whether his client could look at a smaller number of speakers spread around so that they don't need to be as loud, and potentially use of a noise limiter, I explained that I think that would help achieve the sound level that would be necessary if music was to be provided up to 12 days per year compared to what's happened this year. So that would make it more possible that you could maybe get to a position where you could provide music on 12 days, keep it to a level that wasn't a problem to people in the vicinity, and maybe the sound not sound as good, but sound adequate to the customers of the premises. So that is something that may be possible for up to 12 days per year. However, at the same time, I advise that if the intention is to provide it more routinely on up to 12 days per year, sorry, more than 12 days per year, then the even tighter noise levels that would need to be applicable, we've thought about this, and we can't think of how you could do it outside and for that noise not to propagate and cause a significant issue to people. So it's about the balance of frequency of occurrence and how loud and intrusive the noise is. So where 12 days per year may be possible, we don't think that it is possible to do it more than 12 days per year, and then to have a defensible level of noise that we can say to people, it's okay for you to be exposed to that, and it just and then walk away from them and tell them that that's the noise that they've got to be got to put up with. So whilst I think the placement of speakers and the noise limiter and size of speakers would help up to 12 days per year, beyond that, I don't think it would. And I'm firmly, my belief of that is firm in that I don't know how that could be achieved technically. Mr. Keng offered the noise limiter and a terminal hour of 2100 hours. And I thank Mr. Keng for the offer of the noise limiter. But in respect of the terminal hour, that's excellent. But in this situation, it wasn't the timing of the music that was the issue. It was the volume, the nature of the music, and the frequency of occurrence that was the issue, rather than it happening late at night. So there was never a nighttime problem. And at this point, I advise that if if the client does want to consider providing music on 12 days per year, then would need to investigate whether there can find a suitable noise limiter, whether it's worth it, can invest in different speakers to it so that they could find a way of operating and complying with the lower limits. However, the difficult with a noise limiter is that historically they were designed for use inside when you may have had breakout from a building. So they limit the noise to a particular level. But without that building to help contain the sound, then the limiters are that it's very much harder to find a limiter that will limit the noises to such a low level when there isn't anything else to help contain the sound. So when the noise isn't breaking out from a building, you've not got the fabric of the building that helps contain the sound as well. So a limiter needs to be set to such a low level sometimes when it's an outside limiter, if there's properties in close by, that it can technically be difficult to achieve an appropriate setting on that limiter. And again, at that point, I advise that if the licence committee does deem to remove the exemption and allow equipment entertainment on up to 12 days per year, there will be a need to establish a background level against which we can set any limiter, so that we know that we've got a defensible underlying level of noise, and then we're setting any levels of music noise to be comparable to that background. Again, I'd like to stress that all this information was provided not as our optimal solution, but to give options if it was deemed appropriate to allow more than 3 days per year. Because there's a big investment in getting a noise limiter. It costs money. The new speakers will cost money. But if it's also restricted to 12 days per year, I'm not the business person. I don't know if that's economically viable. These are all things that are reasons why I didn't suggest something that may not be appropriate. So at that point, I was thinking, right, if the committee decided that it was appropriate to allow entertainment more often than 3 days per year, how might we condition that to try and give us some control over how to ensure that the noise isn't a problem? And at that point, the only thing I could think of doing was maybe adapting some of the conditions that we've used routinely for festivals, where there's a music festival that maybe happens on a few days a year. So in terms of the email that was provided to Mr. Keng, I suggested some possible conditions. Now, rather than these being recommended conditions, these are conditions that I'm thinking, if that was to happen, how could we maybe get away with it with a condition? So that's where these are from. And Mr. Keng has come back following with my submission with an email with his evidence for the licence holder, which includes some of those conditions in it as potential a way forward. The first condition is, I think I'll probably best to read these. Prior to music entertainment being provided outside of the premises, the licence holder shall employ a suitably qualified and experienced person or persons to oversee the design, installation and setting, including selecting the type of PA system, the position and direction of those speakers, the design and location of any barriers to the propagation of noise, and the setting of frequency-specific noise limiters to ensure compliance with appropriate limits. These limits are to be determined in agreement with environmental health and are to be relative to a pre-existing background sound levels and relevant to the number of days per year that music is provided. At that, the premises licence also should provide a written noise management plan detailing how the speakers and PA system and noise limiter will subsequently be operated by the licence holder to ensure ongoing compliance with the noise limit, and a copy of this management plan to be submitted to licensing and environmental health for us to review that prior to it being used. And that person that from hearing that person, qualified person to be referred to as the premises acoustician. Now that was to try and try and come up with a condition that said if this is going to happen, there needs to be a lot of thought about how things will be set up, how things will be managed, so that entertainment happens, but it produces a level of noise that is that we're confident can be achieved and will not, so it will be imposed on people, but it's appropriate given how often it happens. And I also suggested 3 other potential conditions. And the first one was, prior to the setting of any noise limiting device, the licence holder shall employ the suitably qualified premises acoustician to carry out sound monitoring to determine the underlying background level that's representative of nearby properties, holiday and residential, and the outcome of this monitoring to be submitted to us, Environmental Health, for review and approval in writing at least 28 days prior to any date when the noise limiter is to be set. The reason being for that is because by doing that background monitoring of underlying noise levels, you then have a defensible indication of what the underlying noise levels are. So now how much above that can you go with the music noise without, so that you know that you're not going to impose noise that is too intrusive on people. And then if we get that a reasonable period of time before any noise limiter is set, we've got a chance to review that, check whether that seems reasonable, and if we need to, we can carry out our own checks of background levels to make sure that it's appropriate. And we've also asked that if a noise limiter is required as a condition and it's installed, we're invited to be present when that's set, so we can sort of see what it's set at and have a good indication that, yeah, it is set at a particular level, because then we know where it is. The premises license holders also know that we've seen it as well. So then at that point, we're confident that any limiter has been set in a particular way. The next condition I propose is a difficult one, because I think there is a bit of risk with this, in that, is it going to be possible to find a level that's appropriate to the applicant, not to the applicant, to the license holder, sorry, and not cause a problem? So what happens if we can't find a level so we different speakers, noise limiter, we try setting it up, but we can't find the healthy medium, we can't find the level that's appropriate to the license holders, so the customers are happy that they're getting entertainment they need, and also it doesn't cause a problem. What do we do if we can't get to that happy solution? So within the third condition, I'll just read that, I'm sorry for being long-winded. If it is not possible to set up and limit the music PA system and speakers such that the license holder ensures compliance with the noise limit that is appropriate to the number of days per year that the license holder intends to provide outdoor music entertainment, the number of days when outdoor music entertainment is provided within any given year will be reduced and subsequently limited, restricted, such that compliance with an appropriate noise limit can be achieved and ensured. The eventual noise limit to which the premises operates will be taken from the Noise Council Code of Practice and Environmental Noise Control at Concerts. That's that table I referred to earlier. So it reflects the number of days. So if we try and achieve 12 days, but we find that it's not possible to achieve 12 days, so that it exceeds to provide the entertainment that's appropriate, too much noise is provided, then at that point, is it appropriate to say, actually, that's not achievable, so it needs to be restricted to 3 days a year? So that I don't know how enforceable that condition is, but the reason why I included it was to try and give you an option as to think what happens if in such a situation. And then the last condition I proposed was, once the speakers and PA system have been set up and limited by the premises acoustician, this shall always be used and operated in accordance with the approved noise management plan, and that whenever outdoor entertainment is provided, the licence holder will ensure compliance with the noise limits. That just means that we've gone through all this to set up and try and find a setting that works for them, for the licence holder, but doesn't cause a problem for everybody else. So that if we do get to that point, then there needs to be that specific obligation to then work to those settings going forward. So they're the sort of things that I tried to come up with to try and give options when Mr. King asked the questions about how can it happen more frequently than 3 days per year. Despite this, my favoured outcome is still for a restriction to 3 days per year, because I think that's the thing that is, given the severity of the noise that has occurred this year, then it needs quite a reduction to achieve more noise more often. And if that happens, though, I don't envisage that there need to be any other licence conditions, because given the nature of the area, despite it being a bit above what's really appropriate, I think that's possibly okay for a tourist area, more so than it might be if it wasn't a tourist area. So I think if it was restricted 3 days a year, I don't think there needs to be any other conditions applied. Now, as I say, since I provided this email to Mr. Kang has come back with some suggested conditions, and it's very similar to the ones that I've just gone through, with the exception of the third one, which is the one saying what happens if it doesn't work. So that's the one condition that Mr. Kang hasn't offered. So just to summarise, our preferred option is for the removal of the exemption and for a restriction to 3 days per year. If, however, you consider that's too restrictive in terms of the amount of activity, then if you consider that it's necessary to remove the exemption but restrict to 12 days per year, then we would ask for the Noise Council guidance to be followed in terms of the noise levels that would be set relative to background and specific limits in the base frequencies. However, this is the difficult bit. And I think that's possibly achievable. I can't say that it definitely is, but it's possibly achievable that you could get to a point where you could achieve a background plus 15 decibels, achieve the base frequencies, and it sound okay. It won't sound as good as it sounded this year, but because the volume will be somewhat reduced, but it may be something that they could work with. The difficulty that we can't get over is that we've thought about this and we can't think of any way that it could happen more frequently than 12 days a year, and how you could achieve then comply with a lower sound limit that's necessary when the music becomes more routine. And that's the thing that we're really concerned about, is that if it was to happen routinely next year, we would be in a quite difficult position in terms of the music noise. And so that's the live music, the karaoke, background noise music a little bit louder than it should be as well, and the PA sounds, that if they were to happen routinely, we would be in a position where I think we still consider that a nuisance would be occurring, because we don't see how, given the distance, it can be reduced enough such that it can happen outside and not cause a problem. So that's really where we're coming from.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Mr. Twiddy? Was there something you wanted to clarify?
Yeah, I think probably I'll clarify, but I'm sure Mr. Kang was going to clarify as well. Mr. Dixon mentioned the planning issue. Of course, we all know that planning and licensing are separate regulatory regimes, so anything happening on the planning side of things is not really anything for you to consider today. Is there anything you wanted to say on that, Michael?
No, not really. I mean, it's operated as a cafe, it's not a bar. That's really...
Thank you. Yes, carry on.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me ask a question. So I'm going to refer to the council's licensing policy, and the extract I'm going to refer to is on page 49 of the report pack, halfway down, and it's paragraph 2.2 of the licensing policy. So members of the committee, you're quite fortunate today. You've got David Dodds, who's the environmental health manager, and you've got John, who's the environmental protection officer. So you've got two voices from the environmental health team. So I'm just going to read out this particular part of the council's licensing policy. So this is not an environmental health policy, it's the council's licensing policy. There are parts of the coastal strip of East Lindsey where residential, business and entertainment properties sit cheek by jowl. The licensing authority recognises that residents of these areas are more likely to notice the effects of licensed premises than in other parts of the East Lindsey district, and this is due to the large number of licensed premises and the density of the population, particularly during the summer months. Now, of course, I helped the licensing committee in the drafting of their licensing policy, and I think what the licensing committee is saying there is they recognise it is a fact that if you're on the coastal strip of East Lindsey, you are going to notice the noise from licensed premises than if you are more inland. The licensing authority are not saying that's right or wrong. They're just saying they recognise that that is going to happen. I just wanted to ask the environmental health team, do you treat the coast any different, or would it be the same, basically, if noise levels in, let's say, Louth Town Centre or Horncastle Town Centre or in a village, do you recognise that difference between the coast and the rest of East Lindsey? Or
Yes, we do. And that was partly why I've suggested that if it was restricted to the 3 days per year, the necessity for further conditions are not as important as they maybe would be otherwise, because as it was at the moment, even if it was similar music was provided on 3 days per year, it had been above what was appropriate for a concert. We've taken that into account. Yet we do also consider that it is a coastal strip, but people still have a right to reasonable amenity, and we do take account as well that a caravan isn't as well insulated as a property. But my view of the noise is that despite the nature of the area, it's still excessive and it still needs to be controlled relative to what's happened this year, and it does need to be restricted.
thank you for letting me ask that question, Chair. Thank you.
Before we move on, did any of the committee want to ask any questions? Are you all right at this stage? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mr. Kang, did you want to ask any questions before you present?
If I could, please. It's just regarding the noise monitoring equipment. Just want some clarity on that. I have heard the recordings and we're quite happy that they're not being played today, just so that's on the record. When the noise monitoring equipment is installed into a premises, can the person there, I assume, hits record and hit stop?
Yeah, no, they hit record, they don't hit stop. I tell it how often, how long I want it to record for.
Right, so it's the person that chooses when they
they choose when to make a recording.
And can they move that equipment?
No, to a certain extent, it's not impossible to move it. But what we do, we have a short power cable, and then we have a short microphone cable which gets wrapped inside the equipment. So the microphone cable's only ever a short period, a little length, so you can't move the microphone particularly. And it also, if it's unplugged, it tells us that it's used its battery, so we can see whether there's been an interruption to power. So that's one of the ways that we are confident that the equipment has stayed where it is. However, in this case, because the noise was quite extreme, that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to do my own confirmatory recordings. And when I did these recordings myself, and listened to the noise myself, I was well within the lounge of the property. I was approximately 2 meters away from the nearest openable window, which is where the equipment was. And on the basis of what I heard on that occasion, and then what the levels of sound were, and I'm entirely confident that the stuff that happened earlier was representative. If anything, it was probably a bit louder on the day that I did my first-hand monitoring, where the microphone was where the microphone was 2 meters away from any window, and I was there with it, than what it was on some of the other occasions. So I'm confident that the other stuff was representative.
There's nothing to stop the resident opening a window.
Oh no, everyone's got a right to open a window.
Yeah,
no, I assume that a window is open when
Right, okay.
because people have a right to open a window.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So you're quite happy that the monitoring equipment wasn't moved at all?
Yeah, I'm happy that it wasn't moved, and again, the thing that makes me most confident is that I've done my own monitoring when I was there specifically, and I knew where I was sitting. And if that had been, because that's why I did it, if that had been significantly different to what the other noise had come out as, then that would have been raising alarm in my mind. So that's one reason to do that, because it means that if you get a similar result from stuff that you're doing firsthand, it means that you can be a lot more confident about the stuff that has happened when you're not there.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to now present your case, Mr. King, please?
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think I really need to explain to you what Chapel St Leonard's is like. I think hopefully you're all aware of it, but I think I couldn't really count all the caravans and chalets that are in Chapel St Leonard's, but looking at Google Maps and doing a rough grid and then going from there, I would say there's a minimum of 4,000 caravans and chalets in Chapel St Leonard's, probably more, of which we've got complaints from 4 or 5 of those, well, probably 4 caravans and chalets and 1 resident. We believe that Mr. Toyne, who unfortunately is not here today, who has put a letter in against or to support the review. It's a shame he's not here today, but he is the operator of JT's, which is across the road, and this is the premises where the noise monitoring equipment was located. For a number of years, Little Nan's, which is a cafe, not a bar, and still is a cafe and not a bar, has underperformed. It's been a very quiet little cafe. It's not really done a lot until Mr. Harris and his company took over the premises at the back end of 2022, opened it up in 2023 for the summer season. And it's fair to say that before, or even when Little Nan's opened, Mr. Harris had a very good relationship with Mr. Toyne. Used to take him cups of coffee across the road when Mr. Toyne was cutting his hedge. Mr. Toyne even offered to Mr. Harris some fridges for Little Nan's. So the relationship was very good. Up until the point where Little Nan's started to become a thriving little business, and then relationships became somewhat strained. And then we think this is where the root, the problem has come from. And it's probably echoed in Mr. Toyne's letter, which is on page 41 of your bundle of the report. He does confirm that he's been there 26 years, but then says I was made to take my speaker down playing light background music due to 1 complaint. So he obviously has a bit of a problem that he was told to take a speaker down. Whether he was or not, whether there's a condition on his license, I don't know. But we say that that's where the problems have stemmed from. If I could ask you to turn to page 1 of our evidence pack, and it's the aerial photograph. Don't know who took that. That is annotated with some markings. Little Nan's is just right centre near the top with the yellow dot. The red dots of the Smugglers Inn, JT's, Archers, Happy Days, Stuart's Bar and the King's Oaks Club. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, they're ready. Yeah.
So if you've all got page 1 in front of you. So Little Nan's has got the yellow dot, which is just off right centre near the top. Across the road from that is JT's in the red dots. All the other red dots for the Smugglers Inn, Arches, Happy Days, Stuart's Bar and the King's Oaks. They're all premises that do provide entertainment. Some provide it outside, some provide it with doors open. Some try and compete against each other, such as Happy Days and Stuart's Bar. it is a holiday resort. There's music going on. There's noise coming from amusement arcades. It's not a sleepy little village. It is a bustling holiday village, and with a minimum of 4,000 caravans. You know, you've probably got in excess of 15 to 20,000 people that are there during the summer season. Mr. Dixon said that they only had one complaint from Sherwood Park, one complaint from a resident, which we assume is JT's, one from Greenacres. He said he got 3 complaints from Kingsfield and 7 complaints from the Beeches. But if you look at the distance from the Beeches caravan site and the Kingsfield site to Little Nans, that's a fair distance that for somebody to be complaining. And there are a lot of caravans and chalets in between there. And if you draw a radius around Little Nans, that encompasses a large number of caravans who haven't got a problem with Little Nans, who haven't made a complaint. I think on page 8 of our evidence bundle, we'll wait for you this time. Yeah, page 8 is the map. Sorry. What I've done there is really just Little Nans is in green, and the red pink areas are the holiday parks where the complaints have come from, and the Beeches and Kingsfield are these 2 down here. We don't know whereabouts on there the complaints have come from, but they've come from there, considerable distance, and then you can see the amount of caravans that are in the vicinity that have not complained. So if I can ask you to go back to page 1, that was the annotated photograph. And whilst having that, if you could go to page 39 of your report. So page 39 is the letter from Mr. Broadhurst that was sent on the 14th of November, where he says that he has a static van on Beeches on Trunch Lane. So that's the caravan site over here on the left-hand side. He then says he had to turn his TV up to try and drown the sound, which did not always work. Now, if you've got to turn your TV up to try and drown a sound, if you're in here from music that's being produced here and it doesn't always work, can you honestly believe that somebody in between here and here wouldn't have complained? It's a shame Mr. Broadhurst isn't here today, because we could have questioned him how loud this would have been, but I dread to think how loud it must have had to been at Little Nans for him to not be able to hear to drown the sound out if he turned his TV up. Makes us very suspicious about the complaints that have come from Beeches and that have come from Kingsfield, and I'll let you make your own minds up to whether you actually believe them to be genuine complaints or not, based on that one statement on page 39. So if I just take you through the other pages of the aerial photographs, so if you turn to page 3, which is the one that shows the Little Nans. So Little Nans, I've put a circle, or I should have put a square around it really, but the red circle shows the location of Little Nans. And Little Nans, if you imagine that building is a T shape, it's the top of the T. That is the licensed area of Little Nans. Next door to that, you can see a yellow frontage. The yellow frontage, I think it's actually shown on the pictures that Adrian provided earlier on, might be easier. So the yellow building is a convenience store. We've then got a reception, and then we've then got a chip shop at the end. So within that one building there are 4 units. On the next page, on page 4, again, I've circled where Little Nans is, and it's this little leg on the end of the building here. the block on the T. And you can see on that photograph and on the photograph before a number of benches that are outside the front. And I'll come on to the benches and the area outside the front shortly. The following pages, I've just highlighted really where Little Nans is in relationship to all these caravans and all these chalets. And in particular on page 6, which is the next one, the area that's been removed, the caravans have been removed and it just looks like a bit of a muddy field. I believe they're putting new drainage in there. That's the location of one of the complainants. When you look at those complainants, it certainly wasn't the ones against the roadside and the ones that are next door to Nans. We know that because they're customers of Little Nans, very good customers. So it's somebody with, we assume, within the Brown area. So there's no complaints by people that are actually closer. And then again, the last aerial photograph on page 7 shows again where Little Nans is and shows the relationship to JT's across the road. And I believe one of the windows in the brick building is probably where the noise monitoring equipment would have been sited. Yeah, first floor, yeah. And that is above one of the that is above the bar. There is a bar below there. The bar in JT's does provide entertainment, regulated entertainment, music. The recordings have never been made when they've had entertainment on. This is why I asked the question, does the person hit the record button? They'll have hit the record button, obviously, when they've not got entertainment going on in their place, because if they'd got entertainment going on in JT's, you probably wouldn't have heard the music across the road. Pages 9 and 10 of our evidence are the comments that have been made, which I think Mr. Twiddy has given you unredacted copies of, and they support Little Nans in addition to the letter that you got this morning or last night from Cherry Parks and Little Oaks Bungalows. So if I can ask you to turn to page 13 of your report, please. So page 13 is a plan of the premises, and it probably is, I don't think it's highlighted as well on the printed report, but the area that I've coloured in is the area of the licensed premises. So the premises license is subject to this area and this area only. The premises license does not cover the outside area. Although included on pages 46 and 47 of the report, I just thought it might be easier for ease of reference if I copy the paragraphs out of the section 182 guidance on page 11 of our evidence bundle. Just thought when you're deliberating, it might be easier to just find those on one page rather than go through your report. So there are 3 extracts from the section 182 guidance, 1642, 1643 and 1644. We would say that the area in front of Little Nans is not a beer garden. It's not a beer garden. It is classed as a workplace. Why do we say that? It's accessible to anybody. Anybody can go in there. Anybody can sit on the benches. They could be eating their fish and chips there. They could be waiting to go into the reception. They could be customers of Little Nans. The area in front of Little Nans is not on the lease for Little Nans. So it's not within the company's demise. It's not their area. Indeed, there'd be nothing to stop the chip shop having live music on that area. And if you go back to page 3, so that's the second aerial photograph. You'll see that there are a number of tables out there. So the chip shop is on the left-hand side. There's tables outside there. There's tables outside the reception. There's tables outside the convenience store. There's tables outside Little Nans. There is no segregation between any of those areas. It's all one open area. none of it under the lease held by Mr. Harris's company. Doesn't have gates on it to stop people going in there, doesn't have walls around it. A traditional beer garden, you would probably normally walk through a pub, you go into the back, there'd be a gate to stop you going out, there'd be walls around there, it'd be a controlled environment. This isn't controlled, there's no gates, people can freely walk there as they want. People could be walking along the pavement and just sit on the bench if they wanted. So we would say that it is a workplace, it's not a beer garden. Therefore, if it's a workplace and not a beer garden, we don't feel that you could remove, well, you could remove the right for deregulation on that on the license, but the license isn't being used. The deregulation for the premises license is not being used outside because it is being used as a workspace. So we would argue that this forum, this meeting, the Licensing Act, is not the appropriate place to be discussing this matter. It's not a licensable activity taking place under the Licensing Act of 2003. That said, we don't deny that there has been a problem with noise. We openly said that when we said we don't mind recordings not being listened to. But Mr. Harris and his company, want to continue to provide live music for the people, the tourists that are visiting Chapel St Leonard's, and are quite happy to try and put measures in place to resolve any noise issues, such as smaller speakers, pointing them away, noise limiters if necessary. We don't see how you could probably condition the license for Little Nans to control that, because at the end of the day, there'd be nothing to stop the fish shop providing live music. And if the fish shop provided live music, it's not a licensed premises under the Licensing Act of 2003. They could do that with no conditions at all. But Mr. Harris is quite happy to look into ways that any entertainment out there is reduced. I must say Mr. Harris does operate the chip shop as well. So when I say Mr. Harris can operate out there, he'll probably operate it under the chip shop if he wanted, and if Cherry Park allowed him. So if I go back to where I started, we've got a minimum of 4,000 caravans and chalets in Chapel St Leonard's. We've got complaints from 5 people. 10 of them are coming from some distance away, 10 separate occasions, but 2 of those 5 people from some distance away. Lots of caravans and chalets in between Little Nans and where the complaints have come from that have not complained. I don't have a problem with it. We've got Mr. Broadhurst saying that he had to turn his TV up to drown the sound, and on occasions didn't always work. I can't believe that is a true statement, given that there are no other complaints in between the beaches and Little Nans. 5 complaints, or 5 caravans, chalets, and a residency over 4,000 equates to about 0.0015% or something. A very small number of complaints. Given the fact it's a workplace, given the fact it's not a beer garden, we don't really see what you could possibly do to this premises license. We think that the Environment Health of Protection have brought the review wrongly. We don't think that it's within your remit that you can do anything, given that it's not a beer garden, given that the licensed area is only inside the building only, and given that that area outside is not segregated as such as a beer garden. bins, the outside area can be used by anybody, whether they be from the convenience store, the reception or the chip shop. And that's our submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Twitter.
I think it's probably right in my role as the licensing officer chair just to clarify a few things. I perhaps would disagree with Michael on a couple of issues, but that's fine because that's the whole nature of things, that there will be different opinions. So if it's okay, I will just ask Michael a couple of questions and then he can give the answers. So I'm not aware of any definition in the Licensing Act 2003 or the statutory guidance of what constitutes a beer garden.
It's in the guidance. Just turn to that. Yeah, it's probably more in 16.43. Yeah, but 16.42 says beer gardens are often included as part of a premises license or club premise certificate. Live amplified music that takes place in a beer garden is exempt from license requirements, providing the beer garden is included in the license or certificate applying to the relevant license premises. So what 14.62 is saying, that a beer garden, if it's on the plan, is included within that definition. 16.43 says where a beer garden does not form part of a relevant license premises, and we're saying that it doesn't form part of it because it's not on the plan, and so is not included on the plans to the premises license. It is nevertheless very likely that it'd be a workplace, and the definition of workplace is 67 underneath, which says a beer garden is one example of a potential workplace, and we would argue that this is a workplace. People work there. The singer there is working. So that's why we're saying that it's a workplace, not a beer garden. It then goes on to say that Schedule 1 to the Act says that performance of live music in a workplace that does not have a licence is not regulated entertainment if it takes place between 8 in the morning, 11 at night, in front of an audience of no more than 500. It is happening between 8 and 11, a lot lower hours than that, and certainly there's never been 500 people there. So in our mind, it definitely is a workplace. It is not part of the premises licence. Did I answer it?
I think we're probably at cross purposes.
Okay.
Okay. When you mentioned beer garden, you gave some examples of where you felt it wasn't a beer garden. I think it would be where you said that the public, any members of the public could access it. You didn't have to be visiting the specific premises to actually get into that area. And my impression was you felt that it wasn't a beer garden because other people could access it. I could take you around lots of premises in East Lindsey that I know of where people call a beer garden, and it's at the front of the premises. So that's what rang the alarm bells with me. So did you want to address that?
Yeah, okay. So in my mind, a beer garden is something that's normally under the control solely of a pub. So if it's a front garden, it'd normally just be the front garden of a pub, it'd be their front garden. If it's the back garden, it would normally be their back garden. If it's a back garden, it would normally be walled and everything else. And even if it's a front garden, there would probably normally be a fence around it. Ordinarily, well, probably not ordinarily, but in some instances, a beer garden is included in the area that's on the plan that's attached to the license. So it would have to be down here as the beer garden. What I was trying to say is, in this instance, the guidance is very clear in 16.42, 16.43, what is a beer garden, what is a workplace. And I was just simply trying to explain that we believe this is a workplace. There are no walls down either side that says this area is for Little Nan's, this area is for the convenience store, this area is for the reception, this area is for the chip shop. It's very clear from the photographs in our evidence that there are a number of benches there that are spread across all 4 outlets with no walls that are dividing, and that's what I was trying to get to.
I was just going to point you in the direction of note 67, which is on page 11, where it talks about a beer garden being one example of a workplace, and then goes on to say whether other outdoor spaces such as seating adjacent to a premises, a smoking shelter or a car park constitute a workplace, part of the licensed premises, or neither, will be a matter of fact in each case. Now, my initial reading of that is the section 182 guidance from the Home Office saying you look at each case on its own merits. So you would look at the setup and then decide what was the most appropriate name or classification. Do you read it that way, Michael, or do you read it in a different way?
Chairman, if I think I can probably come in here on this. When it says matter of fact, it means to be determined on each separate occasion, absolutely, as you said, Michael. I think you need to answer a couple of questions about that outside area if you're trying to maintain it's a workplace.
Yeah, I think if I go back to 16.3 of the guidance, if we say that it's a beer garden, 16.3 does say where a beer garden does not form part of a relevant licensed premises and is not included on the plans, it is likely that that is to be a workplace. So even if you do say that it is a beer garden, 16.43 still says it's a workplace, I think.
I think probably what I've done, Michael, is I've done my job. I've flagged it up as an issue for the members to consider when they go into private session with the relevant legal advice. I just felt it was appropriate.
Yeah, no. I think whether you class it as a beer garden or not as a beer garden, I think 16.43 clearly states that it is a workplace.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions then for you, Michael, about this outdoor space. Looking at these pictures,
Yep,
they're the best ones that we have. In terms of that benches, the two benches there, or any of those benches, who provides those? Do you know?
they belong to Cherry Park.
They belong to Cherry Park. And the bin?
Cherry Park,
Who owns?
they've purchased them. They own them. None of that land's under a lease for the chip shop, the convenience store, or Little Nan's. And I believe they even installed the pagoda at the side.
Okay, so who empties the bins?
Mr. Harris's staff empty the bins, but puts them into their bins
Okay.
that they pay for to be emptied. I think it's
And
just a matter of housekeeping, really.
this barn thing?
That's the pagoda, which
Who-
was owned and constructed by Cherry Park.
And just,
And there's a planning application pending for that.
yeah, like Adrian said, planning isn't really relevant to this, but just to be slightly facetious, Mike, on those pictures, what work is that child undertaking? The underage child undertaking? How is the child using that place as a workplace?
There's no entertainment taking place. It's only when entertainment takes place, it's classed as a workplace.
Right, okay, so nothing's going on there. So when there is entertainment taking place, all the people watching
Are watching.
are watching, not working.
The one person singing is working, so that makes it become a workplace.
But all the people that are attending to watch the one person singing are doing what? Watching, not working.
They don't need to be working if it's a
I'm
workplace.
asking you just to confirm, Michael.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Chairman.
A theatre is a workplace, but you go to a theatre, but you're not working when you go to a theatre as a member of the audience.
Chairman, I'll keep coming back to the fact it does say it's a matter of fact to be determined in each case, which is why I've just asked Michael the question. I was being facetious about the child, Michael. Sorry, I had to do that to you, you know that. So that would just be something you will need to, sorry, was that me? That will need to be something you'll need to consider in deliberations.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else got any questions? No? Already been asked? Yeah, okay. Can I just ask a question, please? if the entertainment for outside was removed completely, what impact, if any, would it have on Little Nan's business?
It's quite a hard one to answer because if you removed it from Little Nan's, there'd be nothing to stop the chip shop putting it in there. If you removed it through a different forum, through the correct forum of environmental protection, taking it to the right forum, then it would have a dramatic effect on could have a dramatic effect on the business.
Right.
Because it doesn't just affect Little Nan's, it could also affect the chip shop and everything else that's around there. But we would say that if you removed it in its entirety from the license, premises license for Little Nan's, there would be nothing to prevent the chip shop putting entertainment on under the Licensing Act of 2003.
So actually, when the entertainment's on, the people that are attending the chip shop and the other premises are actually watching the outside entertainment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, you could see from, if you go to page 3, the aerial photograph, the second one in. Go to there, isn't it? Yeah. So where the blue is on there, that's currently or last year where the entertainment took place. So people could be sat outside the chip shop watching the entertainment.
Right.
They don't have to be sat outside of Little Nan's.
Okay.
But because, you know, with this area in total is not under the lease of Little Nan's.
Right.
That's why it's not part of the premises license, because it's not within their lease to use.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I just ask, the people that are entertaining from this area, are they entertaining on behalf of Little Nan's or the Cherry Park themselves? Who pays, basically?
Currently, they're being paid by Little Nan's, but they could be paid by the Cherry Park. They could be paid by the chip shop.
Yes, Mr. Twitter.
Going back to my role again, Michael, I think it's only appropriate that if I know something, I bring it up so the members are aware of it. Who runs the convenience store?
That's also run by Mr. Harris's company, and I think I did say that Mr. Harris does run Little Nan's. He does operate the convenience store and does operate the fish and chip shop.
Thank you.
And then just one other thing, just you've mentioned that that area is not in the lease, but you didn't give the members of the subcommittee a copy of the lease to show that. I'm not disputing what you're saying, but was there any reason you didn't give a copy of the lease to back up what was said?
I didn't really think there was any. I only asked the question this morning of Mr. Harris whether that front area was in the lease or not. It's when you're driving over here and you kind of think of something to add to your submissions. Means we've just had a week and a bit off for Christmas and trying to throw this in and having 4 other hearings to do in the month. It was just one of those things that came to my mind, whether that area was in his lease or not. So that's no other reason for that. We can provide the lease if you want it at a later date, but there was no underhanded reason why we didn't want to provide that lease.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Would you, did you want to ask any questions before you summed up, or did you just want to summarise before?
No, I think just some.
Yes, okay, thank you.
My situation is the same as I explained earlier. The only thing I would clarify is that there were a lot more than 5 complaints. That all the complaints that are highlighted in my original submission in the bullet points relate to an individual complaint from different people. So some of those complaints weren't followed up with noise diaries, but there were initially that number of complaints that are shown in the initial submission. Yeah, I did ask the question before I did this whether a beer garden whether it's a beer garden, you can ask the condition to be removed from a beer garden, even if it's not within the licensed premises. And on the basis of the advice that I got is why I've done the review. And in reality, to me, practically the area is a beer garden. If it's legally different, it's legally different, but practically it's been used as a beer garden, in my opinion. In respect of the music noise, it's a problem that does need resolving one way or the other. And if so, in reality, my position remains the same, that if it's something that you believe you can control, then I would ask you to remove the exemption and to limit the amount of days that music is provided, and to apply conditions. If that is within you deem that's within your right to do that. Because there was a problem that does need to be resolved one way or the other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to sum up, Mr. King?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try not to take so much time. I'll just go back to page 11 of our evidence bundle. I forgot to mention 16.3.1 of the section 182 guidance, which is the bottom there, which is the definition of a workspace, and that's referred to in the guidance above. And it says that it's anywhere that is made available for any person as a place of work. So we would still argue that it is a place of work. You go to the co-op as a customer, it is a place of work. You don't have to work there to go there. But so long as it's made available to any person as a place of work, we would say that you don't need to take any action on this. It's not part of the licensed premises. It's not on the plan. Does not form part of the relevant premises, but it is a workplace. Mr. Harris and his company are happy to and are open to discussions with environmental protection to try and ensure that no further complaints or noise nuisance is made from these premises. It is a busy seaside resort, as you're aware. Going back to 5 people complaining out of a minimum of 4,000, 2 of them being a long distance away. One of them saying he has to turn his telly up to drown the music, which I don't believe. I'll let you come to your own conclusions on that. And then if you do agree that you kind of think that might be a little bit of an excessive statement, you know, what's the validity of the complaints that have been made? We say they've just come from the one complainant. He's rallied round, asked his friends to put complaints in. For some reason or another. Therefore, we'd ask you that you take no action today, and indeed remind you that if you did take action, there'd be nothing to stop the chip shop continuing with the music. I think the way forward really is for Mr. Harris's company to have discussions with environmental protection to try and resolve the matters, but that's in a different forum. It's not for this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Did either of you gentlemen want to add anything before we retire? No.
I can just say that the entertainment, I'm the licensee there, and the entertainment is provided by me.
Right.
I'm in control. I've come from several different venues, big venues and small, and I insist on every artist going through my sound equipment. So if it's too loud, or I think it's too loud, it gets turned down. I also, as soon as I was told there was a problem, I bought a monitor and took regular checks. And I can tell you that the sound system is nowhere near big enough or powerful enough to reach the likes of beaches. I went up and spoke to them about it and double checked, and the people in the office said, no, nothing here. So I can honestly say that there is no way that sound system is creating the problems up at beaches. I can accept, and I apologise if it's been too loud across the road. I will willingly look at changing the speakers round. You know, I'll certainly work with them. I was asked, or it was mentioned by yourselves, to move the speakers, which I did it instantly. I took them down off the front and put them under the pagoda as was requested. And I did provide my email for you to send me any information that needed to be done volume wise. I gave you my email at one of your meetings. Because I don't want the grief as a local councillor in Inglemills. I know what it's like having the problems with noise. I will do my utmost to to make sure that the problem is solved.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're going to retire now to make our decision. Thank you.